This is Bridge Prep. Claire Liu's mission in life is to help people become happier at work. She's the CEO of Know Your Company, a software tool that helps business owners with 25 to 75 employees overcome company growing pains. To date, Know Your Company has helped over 8,000 people at places like Airbnb and Kickstarter. Previously, Claire helped co-found the Starter League, a beginner-focused software school in Chicago, and co-founded ClarityBox, a consulting practice for CEOs. Welcome, Claire.
Thanks so much for having me, Lisa.
So you're the CEO of Know Your Company, which is a software tool that helps owners of small companies overcome so-called company growing pains. What growing pains are we talking about specifically, and how does Know Your Company come to the rescue?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So growing pains are what you might describe as for a CEO who starts to hire a team, and in the beginning they've got maybe 3 people all working together in the same room, maybe then 4, 5, 6, and then you start to break 10 people. And then once you get past 10 people, all of a sudden your company, which used to kind of feel more like a team, when you've just got 10 folks, all of a sudden when you get to 15, you start to realize, oh, we've got to break down now into different departments or have maybe groups of 2 and 3. And then when you hit 20, it's, oh, you know what? Now we're going to maybe need some managers. And then you hit 30 and it's, maybe we need a little bit of a layer of management. Maybe we need a leadership team. So all of a sudden you get to 40, 50, 60, and what used to feel like you really had a finger on the pulse of who people are, what's going on, all of a sudden knowing those things and feeling in tune with your company just gets a lot more difficult, and it's purely because of that transition in size. And as I'm sure you can imagine too, being in different locations, let's say you open up a new office, all of a sudden you don't rub shoulders with everyone as you used to. So those are the growing pains that we see and that we help with.
And how specifically does Know Your Company, fill this void?
Yeah, again, such a good question. So at the core of it, at the core of why people feel like, they don't know each other is because they just don't have that information and the questions aren't being asked to get that information. So what we do with Know Your Company is that it's all about asking questions to help people learn something new and different about the company every single week. And it's in 3 specific areas. So we ask questions around what people are working on, how people are feeling about the company, maybe around the vision or the work itself. And then we ask questions around people getting to know each other better. So something, fun outside of work. And all of these questions, they happen via email. So it's a super, super simple way to respond. It's not this separate feeling of an app or another thing you have to log into. So we make it really easy for employees to participate. And then the whole thing runs like clockwork. So for a CEO to start kicking off Know Your Company and using it, it all just runs really seamlessly. So the way that we just solve this problem is we ask questions in the right way, at the right time, and the right questions to begin with too.
Got it. So I'm wondering, are these growing pains, you think, a uniquely 21st century problem for new companies, or do you suspect that these issues have been plaguing HR departments for generations?
Oh, no, definitely a timeless problem, right? It's just the problem of growth in any team. So, I can only imagine since, we as humans, we've been assembling in groups of people and trying to accomplish any sort of work. It's something that naturally happens, which is the more people you add to a group, the less connected you feel like to each of them. And as a result, the harder it is to actually accomplish whatever task you're setting out to do. So, in today's day and age, in the service industry and the service economy, obviously that manifests itself in, maybe there's high turnover. You have employees who are disengaged because they feel like they don't know what's going on in the company or they don't feel tied to the company mission. But overall, the problem of feeling like you don't know people who you do work with or who you are in an organization with, that's definitely a timeless problem that I think, is just rooted in the fact that, as humans, it's hard to just it's a byproduct of scale. It's hard to get to know people the more people you have around you. So, yeah.
Sure. So walk us through a day in your life as CEO of Know Your Company.
Yeah. Whew, okay. Every day is different. It's such a funny question to answer because of that. I would say on an average day though, I try to get up early, get up at my computer early, maybe knock out some emails. I'll usually also reserve a good chunk of morning to do some sort of deep thinking about something. So it might be writing, it might be designing and working on a new product feature that we have, but I love having that big uninterrupted period of time in the morning to really dig into something. And sometimes, a lot of times, I'll have a breakfast meeting or a lunch meeting with either a potential client or someone we might partner with. I do a lot of speaking, and so finding where those opportunities are and working with folks on that has been it's something that's really fun and effective for us. So I might have that, but I really try to keep those mornings as open as possible. And then in the afternoons, usually what happens is I'll have a bunch of sales calls. So I personally do all the demos for the product. I'm on the phone with a CEO, walking them through Know Your Company and showing them, hey, here's how it could really benefit your company. So I will usually do those calls in the afternoon. I'll usually have maybe a meeting or two also with a prospective client or someone we might partner with. And I try to get out of the office, or I try, if I'm working at a coffee shop, I try to wrap up by, 4:30 or 5. I try not to stay too late. And that's a typical day for me, is just trying to, get up early, stay focused, and, and be efficient.
Great. So Know Your Company is a relatively young company, and this isn't your first time working with a young company. Would you mind just giving us a brief overview of your startup ventures prior to joining?
Yeah, sure thing. It's it's a funny story how I became the CEO of Know Your Company. So I originally am from Minnesota. I came here to Chicago for school, so I went to Northwestern, and I studied learning and organizational change. So that's really where I got my my passion for understanding how do teams work together, what are the best ways to do that, and how can people communicate better within a team. So that's what I really studied. But coming out of school, I actually started a company with a couple friends. So I was student body president when I was in school, and then my two friends, who had happened to be the student body president before me, and then the year before that as well, the three of us, we started a company together. And it's called the Starter League. And it's a beginner-focused software school here in Chicago. It was originally called Code Academy at the time. And, we built it because we ourselves had wanted to learn how to solve problems with technology and didn't know how. So we started this school. It's since become incredibly successful. They've taught over 1,000 people from all over the world. But that was the first company that I ended up starting. So, I was with them for about almost a year and helping start the company. And, it was a time where it was partly through my senior year in college. It was my first summer out of college. And to be honest, I was completely overwhelmed. I think I was a little burnt out. I wasn't really sure if that's what I wanted to do. I just hadn't put a lot of thought into it, and as a result, just wasn't sure if that's something that, I wanted to do. And so I ended up taking some time off, and then I went to go work at an early stage e-commerce company. And at the second startup, I was just an employee among, maybe 6 or so other employees, and I was there for a little over a year. And I really learned a lot from the experience, but I was not happy, to be completely honest with you, Lisa. I wasn't happy there. And the reason I wasn't happy at work in that second startup was because I felt like I couldn't give feedback to my boss. So it's to this very core problem of feeling like I couldn't speak up at work. And it just killed me. It made me so frustrated, and it made me feel like, oh, wow, maybe the problem is me, maybe I'm just a disgruntled employee and I need to figure out and kind of manage my own psychology around this. And then I started doing some research and talking to some other folks and realized that this problem of communication, this problem of feedback, isn't unique just to a company. It's not unique to a person, but it's prevalent in every single organization, regardless of size, regardless of industry. And yeah, it sparked this passion in me of, who's doing anything about this, right? Or what's the solution? And I, decided, well, it's clearly not being solved well, if at all. I want to do something about it. So I quit my job and had no idea what it was that I was going to exactly do, but I just knew I was going to start a company to solve this problem of feedback. I wanted to make it really my life's work. This was that important to me. So after that, what I ended up doing is I started my own consulting practice. It was called Clarity Box, and we worked one-on-one with CEOs to help them get to know their employees better. So, personally coaching and working with CEOs, talking to employees to help them, uncover the things unsaid in their companies. And so my first official client when I started that consulting practice was a company called Basecamp. And Basecamp, for those of you who might not know, and I'm not sure if you're super familiar, Louisa, but they make a project management software. It's the number one project management software in the world, and they've written a couple New York Times bestsellers. Just this incredible company that's been around for about 15 years, and they hired me to help them get to know their company better. And then, ironically enough, or coincidentally enough, they had actually been building a internal software product that was around the same idea. And that product was Know Your Company. So there was a ton of alignment between their CEO, Jason Fried, and I, and we worked really closely together in thinking through about this problem. And when they launched the product, they initially just launched it as a product, and it was a huge hit. It was incredibly successful. They signed up over almost 100 companies in less than 6 months, I want to say. And when, it was showing all these signs of success, they realized, wow, we've got a company on our hands, not just a product. So they decided to spin out Know Your Company as its own separate standalone company. And then they asked me to run it as the CEO. So a bit of a long journey there, a bit of a, but very unlikely or different, in terms of how a company gets founded. But I run now Know Your Company as the CEO and have been since December of 2013. So it's been a fun ride.
Great. So how does leading a company you've joined, like Know Your Company, how does that differ from leading a company that you founded, such as the Starter League?
Sure. They're more similar than they are different, to be honest, because Know Your Company, when it became its own company, it wasn't a company before that. It was just a product, right? So it had no infrastructure in terms of sales, it had no infrastructure in terms of, an actual company. So it is, in a lot of ways, it was starting a brand new company. The only difference is with Know Your Company is there was an existing product and existing customers. So that was nice, right, to have an existing product and an existing customer base. With the Starter League, and when we first started that company, we didn't have a school at all. We didn't have a curriculum. We created all of that from scratch. We didn't have students. We didn't have any teachers to teach, so we had to recruit all those people from scratch. And so that's the primary difference there. I'll say that the challenges are really similar. With Know Your Company, even though there was an existing client base, even though there was an existing product, it's how do you grow that, right? So I wasn't given any sort of initial capital or any funding. We've started at zero. We've been bootstrapped since day one and also profitable since day one. So it was on us as Know Your Company, as a new company, to sell and, sign up new customers, to improve and make the product better. So in that sense, it's more similar, I think, than different.
Great. So you mentioned earlier that early in your career you noticed it was difficult to communicate feedback. I'm wondering, what are some of the other HR challenges that you've noticed among HR, specifically in startups?
So I'm a little biased, I'll say this, but I really do think that it's ineffective communication that is the core root of almost any problem that happens in any organization. So it doesn't matter if you are an early stage company or a company that's been around for over 100 years. I truly believe that the biggest problem any company faces, it's not external. It's not the market. It's not their product. It's not competition. It's actually internal. It's the fact that the internal communication and the way that they talk with people and one another to get things done isn't as good as it could be. And the reason for that is because in terms of communication, it's the things unsaid in a company. Those are the things that end up hurting a company the most. So it's the fact that someone thinks a project should be moving faster, but they don't speak up about it. It's that an employee notices that there's an area of the company that's lagging behind, but they don't speak up about it. So that ends up, being something that hurts the company. There's an employee who feels like their manager isn't doing a good enough job, and so that disengagement affects the company, right? So all of these things that don't get talked about, that don't get communicated, that don't get brought up, it's those pieces that end up hurting a company the most. It's what leads to the greatest rate of turnover. It's what leads to the greatest rate of disengagement. And, in a company, if your people are the most important part of it, it is, after all, what makes up your company. People are how you're going to win. It's who's doing the work. It's how you're going to be different, and it's really your competitive advantage as a company. So if you don't have people who are communicating well and feel engaged and connected to the company, then your company is going to suffer. So that's really, I think, greater than just HR, greater than just early stage companies. It's, this problem of feedback, this problem of ineffective communication. That is really the most kind of dangerous threat to any company.
Got it. Now, in your experience, what would you say is the biggest misconception people have about running a startup?
I think the biggest misconception is that there is a way. And what I mean by that is, you go to a lot of conferences, or at least I definitely do, and, speak at a lot of conferences and have been exposed to, a lot of panels and things. And you'll notice something really interesting, which is everyone seems to have an opinion that there is a way to build a business, that there is a proven path or answers that you can kind of piece together that's, going to guarantee you to build a business successfully. And I think that's a huge misconception, because the real value of going to, conferences and hearing people's experiences and hearing what people have said has been their way has been just to have a frame of reference as you think about what you want to do and how you want to build your company. But there is no definitive way, though, right? So it's, just being able to hear and weigh what other people have described as their paths. But I think that's the biggest misconception, is feeling like there is one path, one set way that there is to build a company, because there are so many, and companies are all different animals, and one size does not fit all by any means.
Sure. Now, we just have time for one more question. I'm wondering, was there a single aha moment that you had when you realized that entrepreneurship or leadership was your calling?
Such a good question. And my answer is no. There's definitely not an aha moment. The way that I've kind of reflected on it is that it was really a choice. So what I realized is that I love solving problems at the end of the day. That's what I'm passionate about, is solving problems and helping people and being a part of something bigger than myself. And so really deciding to start my own company, deciding to, quit my job, and start my own thing as well, those, to me, it wasn't kind of an aha thing where I just kind of jumped up, on the side of my bed one morning and it hit me, but more of reflecting on what was important to me, what mattered, realizing that it's solving problems and helping people that mattered and just making choices to do that. So, yeah, hope that's, somewhat helpful.
That is. Well, Claire, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, no, thanks so much again for having me, Lisa. Really appreciate it.
And best of luck to you.
Thanks.